Have you ever felt like you're constantly giving explanations no one asked for? As if every step you take, every choice you make, every quiet moment you embrace needs to be justified, as if simply existing requires a reason. It's exhausting, isn't it? Maybe you've caught yourself explaining why you're tired, why you didn't want to go out, why you chose to take care of yourself, as if choosing yourself was somehow a betrayal, a sin you must account for. And without even realizing it, you begin to ask for permission to exist. You carry this invisible burden, constantly explaining yourself as if you owe the world an apology for being who you are. It's like walking around with a heavy backpack full of silent regrets. I'm sorry I didn't fit in. I'm sorry I wasn't enough. The more you speak, the further you drift from yourself. We live in a world that teaches us from an early age to please, to adapt, to mold ourselves so we don't make others uncomfortable. So we become masters of justification. We learn to turn our feelings into arguments, into defensive speeches, because somewhere along the way, we were made to believe that our emotions must be validated by others before they can be real. But eventually, something deep inside you whispers, enough. Enough of translating yourself so others can understand. Enough of begging for acceptance, disguised as explanation. Sometimes silence is not surrender. Sometimes it's the first act of self-respect. Because silence can also be a boundary, a firm, quiet line that says, I no longer need to convince you of my truth. What if true self-love begins at the very moment you stop explaining yourself? Have you ever stopped to ask where this compulsive need to explain everything comes from? It's not just a habit, it's a wound. There is something ancient within you, something that fears being misunderstood. Maybe it goes back to your childhood, to that moment when you learned that if you didn't explain yourself well enough, you'd be rejected, or worse, abandoned. So you started overanalyzing every word, every action, monitoring your own behavior as if you were walking on a minefield, where one wrong step could mean emotional exile. This is emotional memory echoing through your soul. Don't say that. What will people think? Be quiet. That's not appropriate. If you act like that, no one will love you. And those words planted a seed inside you, a seed of doubt, a doubt that whispers, maybe I'm not enough as I am. That seed grows into a creeping vine, wrapping around your voice, suffocating your authenticity, dulling your peace. And without realizing it, you begin to live like you constantly need to prove you deserve to be here. But it's not your fault. This is what you learned in order to survive. In a world that often punishes vulnerability and glorifies the mask. Still, every mask tightens over time. Eventually, you can't breathe beneath it anymore, because living to be understood is a slow death in the silence of your own soul. You have the right to be yourself, even if no one understands you. You have the right to feel, without giving explanations. You have the right to exist, even if your story can't be explained in neat, tidy words. And what if the fear of being misunderstood is just a reflection of a childhood where no one truly took the time to understand you? We tend to believe that speaking is a way to set ourselves free, but sometimes speaking too much becomes a prison made of invisible bars. When you feel the need to explain every no, every decision that breaks expectations, every instinct that deviates from the mold, your voice is no longer an expression. It becomes a defense, a shield, a wall, a silent plea to be accepted. And little by little, without even noticing, you stop speaking to express yourself and start speaking to protect yourself. You speak from fear, from guilt, from that old belief that if you don't explain every little thing, you'll lose someone's love. And that kind of speaking, it drains you. It tires your soul, weighs on your chest, dims the light in your eyes. Explaining everything, all the time, is like standing trial every day, where you play the accused, the lawyer, and the judge. You punish yourself for feeling what you feel, and then you struggle to make it all sound acceptable. And still, sometimes they don't believe you, they don't understand you, they don't hear you. Has that ever happened to you? Speaking out of fear is like trying to stop a storm with your bare hands. The words become fragile, nervous, stripped of truth, and your heart, despite all its efforts, remains alone. Your soul knows when you speak from love and when you speak from fear of not being enough. And deep down, you know it too. You feel that difference in your throat, in your stomach, in your chest. And there, in that awareness, a painful but freeing truth emerges. No matter how much you explain, those who don't want to understand you never will. Not because of who you are now, but because they never tried to see you from the beginning. And maybe, just maybe, it's time. Time to stop speaking just to convince and start embracing silence to begin healing. There's a moment in life, a quiet, raw, but beautiful moment, when you realize that silence isn't emptiness, it's shelter, a place without words where finally you can hear yourself again. And no, I'm not talking about the uncomfortable silence, the kind that feels like punishment. I'm speaking about a kind of silence that embraces you, not the absence of sound, but the sacred presence that arrives after countless internal battles. It's not the kind of silence that screams in your chest or pleads to be broken. This silence doesn't demand explanations. It doesn't ask for anything in return. It simply is. It exists alongside you, like a gentle witness to everything you've carried within. And in its presence, you feel, maybe for the first time, what it means to be completely seen without judgment. This silence does not question your pain. It doesn't interrogate your sadness, your fears, or your moments of uncertainty. It doesn't try to fix you or mold you into something more convenient, more acceptable. It doesn't ask you to be okay. Instead, it meets you exactly where you are. It says, you don't have to explain why you feel this way. Just rest. And it is in this silence, listen carefully now, that your soul finally finds a place to breathe, to exhale, without fear of being misunderstood. Because speaking can be exhausting, especially when your words are shaped by wounds, when your voice trembles under the weight of what you've endured. But silence, when chosen consciously, not imposed, becomes a form of healing. It becomes medicine, not the kind that numbs the pain, but the kind that brings you back to yourself, in that sacred space where you no longer feel the need to justify your existence. Something incredible begins to happen. You start to reclaim your voice, not the one you use to speak to the world, but the quiet one within that has always guided you. The voice of your truth, your intuition, your essence. And in that moment, something begins to soften. The sharpness of the pain dulls. The fire of resentment transforms into a quiet flame of awareness. The need for external validation fades away, and in its place, you find something far more powerful, the permission to simply be. To be silent is not to run away. To be silent is not to surrender. To be silent, in its truest form, is to return home, to yourself. It's to look within and say, without a single word, I believe you. I see you. I choose you. Because not everything has to be understood. Not everything has to be explained. There are feelings that are meant to be felt, not translated. There are moments when your silence is not avoidance, it's protection. And there are people in your life who may never deserve the explanation you keep trying to offer them. So close your eyes, take a deep breath, and allow yourself to listen, truly listen, without needing to speak. Perhaps in that stillness, your real journey back home begins. Home, not as a place, but as a state of being where you no longer abandon yourself for the sake of others. When was the last time you truly chose yourself, without guilt? Do you even remember? Or has it become so normal to put yourself last, waiting for someone else to validate your worth, that you've forgotten what it feels like to be your own priority? Choosing yourself is not selfishness. It is emotional survival. It's an act of radical self-respect. It's standing in front of the mirror and saying, no more. No more depletion. No more over-explaining. No more trying to convince others that I am worthy of love, rest, or understanding. But I know, I really do, that the day you decide to place yourself first, something inside you shakes, because you were taught to please others, to yield, to smile even when you're breaking, to sacrifice yourself for the comfort of everyone around you. And when you finally say no, without any justification, the world shifts, the masks fall. Some people walk away, others get angry. Why? Because you're no longer the version of yourself they constructed to meet their needs. And yes, it hurts. It stings to be misunderstood, to be left behind by those who once claimed to care. But you know what? It's real. It's liberation. It's rebirth. Choosing yourself is an act of courage, because when you do, you are also saying goodbye to the version of you who waited endlessly to be chosen by others. You are burying the compulsion to explain your wounds, your pauses, your path. And yes, it's terrifying, because choosing yourself might mean standing alone for a while. But let me tell you something, from the depths of my own experience, the solitude that comes from choosing yourself is not a punishment. It is a cleansing. It is sacred space to heal, to reconstruct your identity, to remember that your value is not up for negotiation, not determined by what others accept or fail to understand. There is a quiet power in saying, today, I don't need to explain myself. Today, I just need to honor myself. And even if no one sees that moment, even if the world doesn't clap for you, it will remain one of the holiest decisions you've ever made. But let's not pretend it's easy. Many of us spent years silent out of fear, not choice. That's a different kind of silence. A silence that doesn't heal. It suffocates. A silence that wraps around your throat like a knot because you've convinced yourself that speaking up will only bring more pain. And yes, sometimes talking hurts, but staying silent, when that silence is rooted in fear, can be even more damaging. Have you felt it? That choking silence where you swallow your truth to avoid conflict, where you bury your feelings just so you don't make anyone uncomfortable. That kind of silence is like swallowing glass. Invisible, but sharp enough to break you from within. And worst of all, with time, you get used to it. You become skilled at smiling when you want to scream. You say, I'm fine, when everything in you is trembling. You learn to fake calm while chaos rages beneath your skin. But silence born from fear is not peace. It is a quiet war, one where the battlefield is your own body, your own mind, your own heart. And that internal war, day after day, drains your spirit. It steals your glow. It convinces you that you don't have the right to exist fully, to take up space, to be heard. Eventually, you lose the ability to identify what you feel because you've silenced yourself for so long that you no longer recognize the map of your emotions. So what's the difference between the silence that heals and the silence that destroys? One word: intention. The healing silence comes from choosing yourself. The destructive silence comes from fearing the loss of someone else. One whispers, "Today, I will care for myself." The other murmurs, "I'm not worthy of being heard." But you are. You are worthy. Worthy of spaces where your voice doesn't need to defend itself, where it simply gets to exist. You deserve relationships where silence is a moment of peace, not a prison. And if you haven't found those spaces yet, be that space. Be the one who listens to your own soul. Be the one who allows your heart to speak, and also to rest in silence, when that is the truest expression of self-love. One day, and you won't know exactly when or how, but one day, something inside you will quietly break, not in anger, not in sadness, but in a strange, sacred stillness. A calm knowing will rise in you. And that day, without a big announcement, without drama, you will simply say, "Enough." And that day will change you forever. Because you will finally realize that you no longer owe anyone an explanation. Not because you feel superior, but because you now understand. Anyone who truly loves you, anyone who truly sees you, doesn't need you to justify your existence. It will be a quiet day, a holy day, a day where you choose not to answer certain questions, where you stop giving reasons for your fatigue, your distance, your boundaries, where you stop translating your soul so others can understand its language. Because constantly explaining yourself is a form of begging for permission. Permission to feel, to choose, to be. But no one else holds that power. They never did. Only you can grant yourself that freedom. To stop explaining doesn't mean to close yourself off. It means to open yourself more fully to your truth, to your intuition, to the wisdom within that knows some choices are not made with logic, but with the heart. Because the decisions that come from the soul may not always be rational, but they are always real. And the truth, when it's real, never needs a justification. So, you realize that silence isn't emptiness, it's wholeness. It's telling the world, I no longer live to be understood. I live to simply be. And from that place, you begin to attract people who don't over-explain themselves either, because they just feel you, they resonate with you, they honor your energy. And that is freedom. Some wounds don't bleed, but they speak. They speak without asking permission. They speak even when you wish they'd stay quiet. Sometimes it's old pain that pushes you to explain too much, to justify every action, every emotion, every absence, as if through words you could stop the pain from returning. But it's not your voice that needs to be heard. It's your wound. Do you remember that time you said this hurts and they told you you were overreacting? When you asked for love and they called you needy? From that moment, your soul learned that in order to be heard, it had to explain itself. And you started repeating yourself over and over again, hoping that this time someone would understand, that this time someone would stay. The truth is, you never wanted to talk so much. You just wish someone would say, even once, you don't need to explain. I see you. You wanted to feel safe being who you are. You longed to be accepted without needing a mask. That's why you spoke so much, not for attention, but out of fear of being abandoned. Each word was a silent plea. Can you see me now? Do you understand me now? Are you going to leave me again? But there's a truth that even though it hurts, sets you free. The person who doesn't want to see you won't, no matter how loud you scream. And the one who does want to see you doesn't need you to say a thing, because soul recognizes soul, and that doesn't need to be explained, it's simply felt. So take a deep breath, turn inward, and speak only when your heart decides, not when the wound demands. Because you are not your explanations, you are the truth that lives behind them. There's a kind of exhaustion that sleep can't cure. It's a soul-deep weariness, not from your body, but from years spent explaining yourself, defending yourself, trying to be understood by people who never truly wanted to listen. Have you ever felt that? Speaking from the heart, and all you get is silence. Sharing your wounds with someone who only responds with judgment or apathy, hoping for an empathetic glance, but getting criticism instead. That hurts. But what hurts more isn't the cold reaction. It's the echo of your soul, feeling invisible all over again. And so, little by little, something inside you starts to fade. You stop talking like before. You stop sharing with the same light in your voice. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you finally understood. Some places are not meant for your truth. The soul gets tired when it's ignored, when its voice becomes noise to others, when its emotions are dismissed, mocked, rejected. And that's when many of us learn to stay silent, not out of choice, but for protection. Because sometimes it hurts less to stay quiet than to feel again the wound of not being heard. But that's not healing. That's hiding your pain beneath the rug of your soul. And sooner or later, that rug gets lifted. That's why today, I invite you to pause, not to explain yourself, but to hold yourself. Close your eyes and ask, where did I exhaust myself from talking too much? When did my soul go unheard? And what do I need now to begin truly listening to myself? Because when you listen with love, when you stop demanding explanations from yourself, that's when real healing begins. We live in a world that demands smiles, a world uncomfortable with raw pain, a world that wants you to say, I'm fine, even if you're falling apart inside. And little by little, you learn to justify your sadness, to explain why you're not okay, to offer valid reasons, hoping people won't walk away when they see your tears, as if feeling deeply was a flaw, as if your pain needed a signed approval to be real. But no, pain doesn't need to be explained. Pain deserves to be honored. You don't need to justify your tears. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your sorrow. You're not required to dress up what's breaking inside you with pretty words. Because pain isn't looking for approval. It's looking for presence. It needs space to breathe. It needs your arms, not your arguments. And you know what's the saddest part? That pain often grows, not because of what it feels like, but because of how often you feel forced to justify it. I'm just tired, you say. I've had a rough week. Sorry, it's just stress. Lies dressed as explanations. To avoid discomfort, to stay accepted, to not be seen as weak, dramatic, or negative. But feeling doesn't make you weak. Denying what you feel, that's what breaks you. So today, let yourself feel. Without guilt, without explaining, without covering it up. Your pain doesn't need logical proof to be valid. Your soul already knows, and all it's asking of you is to stop fighting with what you feel. Make silence your temple, and within that temple, let your pain speak, free of judgment. Here begins true emotional freedom. There's a silent belief that lives in many wounded hearts, the idea that if you open your soul completely, you'll be more loved, and so you share everything. You undress emotionally, confess your most intimate wounds, hoping that someone, upon seeing your raw sincerity, will hold you tighter. But it doesn't always happen that way. Not everyone is ready to hold your truth. Not everyone has the sensitivity to receive what you've kept quiet for years, and most painfully, not everyone deserves it. Your truth is sacred. It's not a speech to persuade, not a product to be approved. Your truth is a fire. It can illuminate or it can burn. It all depends on where you place it. And many times, in the name of love or the desire for closeness, you gave yourself completely to people who lacked the ability or the intention to truly understand you. People who turned your vulnerability into judgment, who used your confessions as weapons, who saw your sincerity as weakness. So you shut down. You promised never to open up again. But that's not fair to you. The mistake wasn't trusting. The mistake wasn't speaking. The pain came from not recognizing who did and who didn't deserve that sacred part of you. Learning to choose who gets to hear your truth is an act of self-love. It's saying, my story isn't for just anyone. It's for those who know how to honor it. Because there are those who only want to know you to control you. And there are those who listen to protect you. The difference lies in their presence, their energy, their intention. Not everyone deserves your silence, and not everyone deserves your voice. Both are gifts. So don't blame yourself for having revealed yourself. But from now on, open up only where your soul feels safe. Sometimes, talking too much becomes a form of forgetting, an elegant distraction, an ancient strategy to avoid feeling what truly lives inside you. Because while you talk, analyze, justify, explain, you drift away from yourself. You dissolve into the other person. You get lost in the maze of what others expect from you. But when you choose silence, not the kind that's imposed, but the sacred kind, something inside you aligns. The pieces begin to fall into place. Chaos finds a center. Silence, at this level, is not hiding. It's returning. It's allowing yourself to hear what the noise of the world had drowned out. That soft, persistent, authentic voice. The voice of your soul. That's when you realize you have nothing to prove. You're not here to please or to fit in. You came to remember who you are, not to explain yourself. In that silence, external judgments dissolve. The need to be understood fades, and in its place, certainty arises. You don't need to be understood to have value, because your worth doesn't lie in how well you can explain your pain, but in how deeply you dare to dwell in it. Silence then becomes a medicine, a way to reconnect, a mirror where you finally recognize yourself, without ornaments, without scripts, without defenses, and you begin to see that everything you were looking for on the outside was waiting quietly, patiently, lovingly, within, silent, still, present. You remain quiet to remember, quiet to return, quiet to heal. Because sometimes the road back to yourself begins with one simple, powerful silence. There's a quiet moment, almost imperceptible, when something inside you changes. There are no screams, no drama, just an inner decision. Firm, calm, final. I won't beg anymore. And it's not pride, it's not coldness, it's dignity waking up. It's self-love finally rising from the ground where it knelt for so long. Because yes, you did beg. You begged with explanations. You begged with apologies you didn't owe. You begged with sweet words that masked pain. You begged through anxious silences, hoping the other person would notice your absence. And that begging wasn't always obvious. Sometimes it disguised itself as patience or excessive understanding or pretending everything was fine. But your soul remembers it all. It remembers how you dimmed your light so as not to bother, how you got lost just to be loved, how you explained yourself over and over again, hoping to be enough. Until one day, you choose yourself, not out of anger, but out of love. A love so deep, so true, that it no longer allows you to keep giving away your pieces to those who don't honor them. Because the soul that chooses itself stops begging, stops explaining, stops waiting. It begins to walk. It walks without resentment, but with memory. It walks without revenge, but with boundaries. It walks with the heart in hand, not to offer it, but to finally hold it. And in that step, everything changes, not outside, but inside of you. Silence becomes your companion. Solitude becomes your home, and you finally become your own safe place. To convince, what a heavy word when it's born out of fear. Convincing someone that you're enough, that you're worth staying for, that your feelings aren't too much, that your wounds aren't a burden. It's a dance that drains you, a conversation that echoes endlessly in your chest. What if I explain it better? What if this time they understand me? What if I change a little, just so they won't leave? But you don't see that every time you do. You're betraying yourself, piece by piece. You let go of your essence, just to fit in. You reshape your love to make it acceptable. You soften your truths so they won't disturb. And what ends up hurting the most isn't even the rejection. It's everything you had to stop being to avoid it. Until one day, you've had enough. Not of them, but of yourself. Of looking at your reflection and not recognizing who you've become. Of realizing that trying to convince someone is a golden prison, shiny on the outside, suffocating within. That day, your soul makes a promise. Never again. No more begging to be understood by someone who chooses not to see you. No more translating yourself. No more performing to be loved. That day, words shrink. You only say what truly matters, what rises from your core. And if they don't understand, that's okay, because your truth isn't up for debate. It's meant to be lived. Whoever has a soul will feel it. So lower your voice, not out of fear, but like someone guarding a treasure. Your truth doesn't need volume, only direction. There is no act more intimate or more powerful than the moment you decide to go quiet. And in that silence, you choose yourself. You don't stay quiet out of surrender, but out of self-respect. You're not silent because you fear the response, but because you finally love yourself enough to stop chasing it. Because you now know that some battles are not won through words, but through letting go. Silence can also say, I owe you nothing. I don't need your approval to exist. What I know about myself is enough. And that is an inner revolution. For years, they taught you that your worth depended on being understood, on being clear, on being coherent for others. But no one ever told you that your worth also lives in your silence, that your voice remains alive even when you don't speak, that you are still whole even when you don't explain yourself. In that silence, something new begins, a reunion, a rebirth, a reconciliation with yourself. You stop trying to persuade, you stop needing to please, you simply crave peace. And peace doesn't shout, peace doesn't argue. Peace settles in when you no longer bargain with your truth. So yes, silence is an act of love, of power, of maturity. Silence to avoid betraying yourself. Silence to break the cycle. Silence because sometimes silence isn't surrender, it's self-choosing. And in that sacred instant, true healing begins. Tell me, how many times have you broken just to be understood? How many times have you drowned in explanations no one asked for, just to avoid feeling unwanted? How many times have you muted your own essence, thinking that would make them love you more? And now that you've made it this far, you begin to see just how much strength lives in your silence. How beautiful it is to not have to explain who you are. Maybe healing doesn't happen when you finally say everything. Maybe it happens when you no longer feel the need to say anything at all. Maybe the soul doesn't crave words, it craves presence. It wants you to stay, to hold yourself fully, to choose you, even if no one else does. This video was a space to remind you of something incredibly important. You are not defined by your explanations. You don't need to convince anyone to deserve love. And sometimes, choosing to stay silent is the deepest act of self-love you can offer yourself. So now, I invite you to share in the comments the moment in your life when you first felt like you had to explain yourself all the time. Reflect on what might happen if today you decided to embrace silence, and in that silence, reconnect with yourself. If this message touched something deep within your soul, I ask you from the bottom of my heart to support this channel with a big like. That small gesture helps us continue creating these spaces of depth and healing for thousands of people just like you. Don't forget to subscribe and activate the notification bell so you never miss the next video that will appear right here on your screen. That next video will be another step on your journey back home. Because, as Carl Jung said, what you resist persists, what you accept transforms, and you are already ready to transform. What happens when you finally wake up, and that fire that used to burn you from the inside out suddenly doesn't ignite anything at all? They promised you that spiritual awakening would feel like an explosion of light, like clarity, purpose, inner power. But instead, you found something else, something colder, something emptier, something real. You, the sensitive one, the seeker, the soul that never settled for what the world offered. You started seeing beyond the masks. You began to understand the game. You noticed how life plays on autopilot, like a soulless dance, choreographed by habit, fear, and routine. And when your eyes opened, it wasn't the light that blinded you. It was the silence. A silence so thick, so sacred, yet so uncomfortable, as if something inside you had stopped working. You no longer wanted to chase anything. You didn't feel the urge to impress, to compete, or even to arrive anywhere. The desire to prove yourself simply dissolved. And in its place, an eerie calm took over, a kind of hollow peace. Does that sound familiar? That sensation that the soul turned off the lights, but forgot to switch on new ones. Your body's still alive, but the fire isn't. Your mind recognizes that something has shifted, but it can't quite decode what your heart already knows, that the old motivation is gone. You're not alone. This happens to those who truly awaken, not the ones who just read about spirituality or talk about it to sound wise, but the ones who actually live it. The ones who dare to die before they die. The ones who are no longer satisfied with noise, applause, or costume roles. But no one talks about this part, right? No one warns you that the hidden cost of awakening is losing everything you thought you were. And without ego, without script, without stage, how do you move? Where do you act from? This isn't a motivational speech meant to get you back on your feet. This is an invitation to look at that void without fear, to understand why you feel the way you feel, to discover that in that stillness, in that hole, in that apparent nothingness, there is a seed, a seed you don't know how to name yet, but one that has already started to germinate within you. They told you that awakening meant finding your purpose, your fire, your center. They sold you enlightenment like it was a shortcut to fulfillment, as if simply seeing the truth would make you feel alive again. But no one told you that sometimes seeing the truth turns you off, because the drive you used to have wasn't really yours. It came from the ego. It was a force born out of fear, fear of not being enough, fear of not belonging, fear of not being seen. And when you awaken, fear melts away. But with it, so does the fuel that made you run. You stop, not out of laziness, not because you've lost interest, but because something within you simply cannot keep moving the way it used to. What once inspired you now feels ridiculous. The goals that once excited you now seem fake, and it's right there, in that strange stillness, that the fall begins. But the fall is not downward, it is inward. It's a silent unlearning, like your soul is slowly erasing, one by one, all the instructions you were given since childhood. Be someone, do more, prove your worth. But what if there's nothing left to prove? What if worth isn't earned, but remembered? That's where the limbo begins. The ego falls. But the true self hasn't taken form yet. The motivation that used to drive you dies. But the new one hasn't found its voice. And there you are, suspended, confused, silent. This is the hidden cost of awakening. It's not instant peace. It's total dismantling. It's like tearing down a house before knowing what the next one will look like. And in the meantime, there's only rubble. And without a home, without a script, without urgency, you feel strange. You look in the mirror and don't recognize your reflection. You wonder why nothing excites you anymore. What once felt like life now seems like a badly lit stage. No applause, no meaning, no direction. But listen to this carefully. That is not failure. It's transition. It is the exact process that begins when the soul starts to take control of the body again. Because the ego always screamed, but the soul whispers. And in the middle of that muffled noise, you begin to hear the first murmur. It's not a command. It's not a duty. It's not an obligation. It's more like a breeze, a subtle shift, a barely perceptible movement. Yet, it's real. And suddenly, you understand. You didn't lose motivation. You lost the mask. What comes next bears no resemblance to anything you've ever experienced. Because what follows now will no longer be driven by fear. It will come from truth. It all starts quietly. One morning, you wake up without the usual urgency, without the old sense of direction. One night, you find yourself staring at the ceiling, not thinking about anything in particular, just floating. You hear your friends talk about goals, travels, dreams achieved, and you listen silently as if you've already lived it all in another life. There's a weight in your chest that you can't name. It's not sadness, it's not laziness, it's something else, something heavier, quieter. And so you begin to ask yourself, what's happening to me? Why don't I want anything? Why doesn't anything excite me anymore? Did I break inside? Did something disconnect and never come back? But no, you're not broken. You're just without reference points, because the old ones no longer work. They no longer resonate. They were answers that belong to a version of you that no longer exists. What no one tells you about awakening is that it's not a destination. It's a demolition. It's not a constant state of illumination. It's temporary blindness, like when a bright light hits your eyes and blinds you first, before you learn to see again, with different eyes. And in that strange in-between, you become blind at the level of the soul. You don't know what you want. You don't know what your purpose is anymore. And the uncertainty becomes total. Outside, the world keeps spinning with its slogans. Follow your dreams. Never stop. Make it count. But you hear all that as noise. Those phrases feel like they're meant for someone else. Someone who still operates from the ego, who still needs to be someone instead of just being. And there it is, the real conflict. No one prepared you for the silence that follows awakening. Because this silence isn't emptiness, it's a crater, a sacred echo that keeps repeating one truth. I am no longer what I was, but I don't yet know what I am. Can you live in that space? Can you stay in that strange place with no identity, no plan, no direction? Most people can't. Most people run. They numb themselves. They put the costume back on. They return to the race, even if deep down they no longer believe in it. They convince themselves it was just a phase, that going back is easier than living at the threshold. But you don't fit anymore, and you know it, because trying to fit in again only makes you feel emptier. It's as if your soul is whispering, "Don't push me back into what no longer vibrates." That's why you're tired. Not tired of the world. Tired of pretending you still believe in it. Not tired of life. Tired of performing. Not tired of doing. Tired of forcing yourself to do from a self that quietly died. This is where the old fire burns out, and the new spark hasn't ignited yet. You're in between fires, between identities, between systems of meaning. You're a chrysalis, not a caterpillar, not yet a butterfly, just a shapeless, unproductive thing that serves no immediate function. But inside that shapelessness, everything is there, everything new, everything real. And yes, it hurts, because no one applauds you for pausing. No one celebrates your emptiness. Society doesn't know what to do with someone who isn't running, who isn't chasing, who doesn't have answers. So you start judging yourself. You call yourself lazy, lost, useless, but you're not. You're being rewired from the inside. Carl Jung knew this. That's why he spoke of the negrado, the dark night of the soul, the stage where the ego dissolves and the self begins to take form. But that process is silent, it's blind, it's slow, and you have only one option: stay. Hold yourself through the not knowing. Trust through the not feeling. Because if you run now, if you force yourself to produce, to perform, to go back to the familiar, you will betray yourself. And the soul doesn't forget betrayal. It will wait. Always. It will wait in silence. Until one day, you stop running long enough to finally hear it. Carl Jung never romanticized awakening. He didn't dress it up in pastel colors or wrap it in sweet, comforting words. For him, true transformation didn't begin with a divine revelation. It began with a brutal unraveling. The fall of the ego wasn't the end. It was the threshold, the entry point to the journey toward the self, that deeper identity that needs no mask, no external validation to exist. Jung called it individuation, a process of integration, of becoming whole. Not better, not more positive, not more successful, just more real. And to become real, he said, we must go through the shadow, through everything we deny, repress, and hide. It's not about flying toward the light. It's about descending into the basement and lighting a single candle. This is why Jung spoke of the negrado, the dark stage of internal alchemy. That phase where everything old decays, where the superficial self crumbles and you're left suspended in a fertile emptiness. There's no shape, no certainty, only a silence that hurts but purifies. a silence that burns, yet prepares. In that silence, what once seemed like motivation reveals itself as performance, and what once felt like depression becomes the soul's rest. Because you're not unmotivated, you're simply done with lying. You can no longer force yourself to do what you don't feel. You can no longer sell your energy to a system that doesn't recognize your truth. Jung also spoke of an antiodroia, that moment when something, pushed to its extreme, flips into its opposite. The ego that runs endlessly collapses. The drive to achieve, conquer, impress, transforms into a deep longing to disappear, not as an escape, but as a necessity, to begin again, from another route. And here enters the archetype of the hermit, not the escapist recluse, but the wise one who retreats in order to listen, to reorder the inner chaos, to prepare for a return, not driven by performance, but by authenticity. Sometimes disappearing isn't giving up, it's protecting the seed of something new. But the world hates that stage. It mistakes it for failure. It pathologizes it, tries to medicate it, speed it up, correct it, because the modern world idolizes productivity and despises mystery. But the soul is not in a rush. The self is not born under pressure. It only emerges when the ego yields, when the persona goes quiet. That's why Jung said that enlightenment doesn't consist in imagining figures of light. It means making the darkness conscious. And that is exactly what you're doing, even if it doesn't look like it, even if no one sees it, even if you doubt it. You are illuminating a part of yourself that has been dormant for years, maybe even lifetimes. The self that used to perform is dead. The script that held you up has burned away. And now you're here, waiting, listening, rebuilding. You don't know how, and you have nothing to show for it. But this is sacred. This is spiritual bravery. Because remaining in the void takes more courage than chasing 1,000 goals. Individuation is not a destination. It's a constant passage between death and rebirth, between confusion and clarity, between who you were and who you don't yet know you can become. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about becoming who you've always been, beneath all the roles, beneath all the masks. And yes, the path is lonely, because no one can walk it for you. You can have guides, books, signs, but the real journey is internal. And sometimes all you can do is stay still, not move, not distract yourself, not betray yourself. Just hold on, even when nothing has form yet. This is what Jung meant by living symbolically. It means listening to the soul, letting dreams speak, sensing where the inner wind is blowing. It means not deciding from the anxious mind, but from resonance, from the body, from that part of you that can't explain, but knows how to recognize. Because the self doesn't push, the self calls. And now you're beginning to hear it. And then, just when you thought everything was lost, something starts to move. It's not fire. It's not an explosion. It's barely a tremor, as if the soul is breathing for the first time after a long sleep. You don't know why, but one day you feel the desire to write, or to walk, or simply to sit in silence and listen to the wind. Not because you have to, but because something inside says yes. It's a new kind of motivation, one that doesn't come from fear or pressure, one that doesn't scream, doesn't demand, doesn't compete. It's a gentle yet firm force, an internal pulse that seeks no applause, no outcome, no heroic goals. It just wants to express the truth, that which can no longer be hidden, that which needs to come out. Here, there is no urgency, no anxiety, no clock ticking, because the soul is not in a hurry. And finally, you realize you don't need to be either. you discover that acting from presence doesn't mean staying still. It means moving at the right time, from the right place, with a heart unburdened by need. You begin to feel something new, a strange peace, a calm that doesn't depend on whether things work out or not, because you no longer act to achieve. You act to honor what you are, what vibrates in you, what the world needs to receive through your authentic existence, not to impress, but to resonate. And the most beautiful thing is that this action, this energy, this creation becomes more powerful than any goal you once had. Because now, you no longer need applause. You're satisfied with feeling that you're not betraying your essence. You're fulfilled by that inner sense of congruence, of coherence, of deep alignment with your soul. You come to a quiet but powerful realization. You can say no without guilt. You can choose silence without feeling like you've failed. You can be present in a conversation without needing to convince anyone of anything. You begin to live from a different center, a quieter place, a more honest space, one that is rooted not in the noise of the world, but in the stillness of your own being. And from that stillness, you discover something unshakable, indestructible, a place inside you that no chaos can touch. You no longer need a map meticulously drawn by someone else's expectations. You no longer crave clear goals written in ink and stone. What you need, you already carry, a living compass. And that compass is no longer external. It's no longer someone else's voice, someone else's rulebook, someone else's approval. It lives inside of you now. And every time you align with it, every time you listen to its subtle pull, the path unfolds. Not because you force it to, not because you push the pieces into place, but because life itself recognizes the truth inside you and responds. This is the paradox. The less you push, the more things begin to move. The less you struggle, the more things begin to flow. The less you wear masks to fit in, the more deeply you connect. Not with everyone, no, but with those who are also awakening. With those who have also dared to sit in the silence, who have heard the same wordless call and stayed long enough to hear what emerges from within it. And from this new center, from this inner alignment, you begin again. You create again. You move again, but not to fill a void, not to prove yourself, not to silence your fears. You move because the emptiness that once felt unbearable has transformed into seed, and you, almost without noticing, have become fertile soil. You've become a bridge, a channel, a vessel between what cannot be seen and what longs to be born. Motivation has not died. It has simply changed shape. It no longer burns with the frantic fire of urgency or the adrenaline of needing results. Instead, it glows with a steady flame, one that does not flicker in the wind. It is no longer about outcomes. It's about devotion. Quiet, unwavering, grounded devotion. A deep and sacred commitment. Not to performance, not to perfection, but to truth. And if you've made it this far, if these words are echoing inside of you, it's not by accident. Something within you chose to stay. In the silence, in the uncertainty, in the space where most people turn away. And that, though few will say it, is a rare kind of courage. It is an act of quiet rebellion, a sacred resistance. Because to sit in the unknown without trying to escape, it is not weakness. It is strength of the highest order. Maybe you've felt strange lately, as if the world continues to spin, and you are just still. Maybe you've been feeling disconnected, unmotivated, as if your inner compass had stopped pointing anywhere at all. Perhaps you've looked around and wondered, What happened to my fire? But you didn't forget your path. You're remembering it, not from your mind, but from your soul, from a place so deep and true that it cannot be rushed or forced, a place that takes time, that honors timing, that knows becoming is not a sprint, it is a metamorphosis. You are not lost, you are just in the chrysalis. And if any part of this message resonated with your experience, if you felt, even for a second, that someone finally put words to the invisible thing you've been carrying, then I invite you to write it down. Not for likes, not for recognition, but for yourself. So your soul can hear your voice speaking its truth out loud. So your inner knowing can be anchored in your own expression. Leave a comment that says, "I'm in the chrysalis and I will emerge." That phrase is not just a slogan. It's a promise, a silent agreement between you and your essence. It's a symbol. It's your soul whispering, "I didn't give up. I'm just waiting to remember my shape." And maybe, just maybe, someone on the other side of the world will read it. Someone in their own moment of solitude, in their own dark night, in their own quiet transformation. And in reading your words, they will feel less alone. So if this message speaks your language, if this frequency hums in your bones, subscribe, turn on the bell. Not for the noise of more content, but because here, we do not speak from the surface. We don't pretend. We don't perform. We sit with you in the shadows, in the mystery, in the sacred space between what was and what is yet to come. We sit with you in the chrysalis, quietly holding space, until you remember what your wings feel like. Thank you for finding the courage to look within yourself. Thank you for choosing not to run away when things felt overwhelming. Thank you for staying with yourself, even when the pain was loud and the answers were silent. That, right there, is the essence of true awakening. Not in grand revelations or external miracles, but in those quiet moments where you chose to face your truth rather than escape it. It takes incredible strength to remain still when your mind urges you to flee, when everything inside you feels like it's breaking apart. And yet, you stayed. You stayed through the confusion, through the shadows, through the doubt. That act alone, the decision to not abandon yourself, is the beginning of everything. It's not easy. It's not supposed to be. Growth rarely feels like a warm embrace. It often feels like falling apart. But even in that disintegration, something sacred is unfolding. You don't have to rush. This isn't a race. There is no destination you must reach in a certain time. No level of spiritual achievement you have to unlock. You are not late. You are not behind. You are exactly where you need to be, even if your mind tells you otherwise. Stop measuring your progress by how much you know or how quickly you heal. That's not what this is about. This is about trust. Deep, quiet, unwavering trust. Not in the world, not in others, but in yourself. In the process that is uniquely yours. And that trust doesn't require understanding. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to figure everything out right now. In fact, some of the most beautiful transformations happen in the dark, in the confusion, in the stillness. All you really need is to trust that there is meaning in the mess, that something greater is moving through your life, even if you can't see it yet. Even if you feel lost, you're still on the path. Even if it feels like nothing is happening, everything is shifting. And when the moment comes, when the timing is right, when the pieces begin to align, you won't feel the need to escape anymore. You won't feel the weight of fear holding you back. You won't run. You'll rise. You'll fly. Because by then, you'll know who you are. Not because someone told you, not because you read it in a book or heard it in a video, but because you discovered it in the hardest, most honest place there is, within yourself. So thank you, again, for staying, for breathing through the storms, for listening to your soul when the world told you to be quiet. That is the revolution. That is the transformation. That is the awakening. How many more blows can your mind endure before it completely breaks? How many more nights will you lie awake, trapped in thoughts that refuse to let you rest, haunted by an emptiness you can't explain? If anxiety is consuming you, if sadness has become your silent companion, then something deep within you has been calling out, ignored for far too long. Carl Jung believed that psychological suffering is not a mistake, not a curse, but a profound message from the unconscious, one that demands to be heard. What we call anxiety or depression might actually be the shadow of everything we've repressed, now pounding on the door of our conscious mind, begging to be acknowledged. But the real question is, are you ready to face what's truly tormenting you? Today, I'll take you into Jung's vision of the hidden roots of your anguish and how you might finally free yourself from it. To Jung, anxiety and depression weren't just disorders to be eliminated at all costs. He saw them as powerful messages from the unconscious, emotional signals trying to tell us something deeply important about ourselves. And yet, in modern psychology, we're often taught to silence these emotions. We distract ourselves, we medicate, we run away. But Jung invites us to ask a much more unsettling question. If your suffering could speak to you, what would it say? Jung believed that depression is often the result of something within us that we've pushed down, maybe a desire, a dream, a truth we've denied in order to fit into society or avoid discomfort. Depression, in his eyes, was like a lady in black. When she shows up at your door, don't chase her away. Invite her in. Sit with her. Listen. When someone falls into depression, it's because a vital part of their inner world has been silenced. Their life energy dims. It's like their true essence is being suffocated by external expectations, fear of change, or denial of what they really need. Imagine someone who has always wanted to be an artist, but gave it up out of fear of judgment or financial insecurity. Over time, they may fall into a deep sadness without knowing why. Their unconscious is crying out, "You've betrayed an essential part of who you are." Now let's talk about anxiety. According to Jung, anxiety arises when the future becomes a threat we feel we cannot control. It's not just fear, it's fear that has taken root in the unconscious. It can stem from unresolved trauma, unrealistic expectations, or simply the overwhelming sense that life is slipping out of our grasp. Anxiety doesn't always mean something terrible is going to happen. Sometimes it's the inner self sending out distress signals, a warning that we're not living in alignment. Maybe you're scared to make a decision. Maybe you've been pretending to be someone you're not. Maybe you're terrified of failure, and so you stay frozen, trying to maintain an image that isn't real. A person who's spent their whole life trying to be perfect might suffer from intense anxiety because deep down, their unconscious knows the truth. No one can wear a mask forever. And so the anxiety becomes a kind of alarm, not a punishment, but a wake-up call. You must integrate your true self before everything collapses. To Jung, the worst thing you can do with depression or anxiety is reject them. That only makes them more powerful. The real path to healing isn't in escaping, but in listening. If you feel overwhelmed by these emotions, Jung would urge you to ask yourself, what part of me have I been ignoring? What emotions have I been too afraid to feel? What decisions have I been putting off because I'm scared of what might happen? The key isn't to fight against anxiety or depression. The key is to explore their roots, because hidden beneath them might be the very answers you've been searching for. Carl Jung described the shadow as the hidden part of our psyche, the accumulation of thoughts, emotions, desires, and traits that we have suppressed because they don't align with the image we want to present to the world. It's everything we've denied in ourselves, whether due to social norms, upbringing, or fear of being rejected. Yet the shadow does not disappear just because we choose to ignore it. On the contrary, it gains strength in silence. It emerges in subtler, often destructive ways: anxiety, sadness, insecurity, self-sabotage. Jung warned that the more we repress our shadow, the more control it gains over us. It begins to influence our decisions, cloud our perceptions, and distort the way we experience life. It becomes a silent puppeteer, guiding our reactions and choices from the depths of the unconscious. But how exactly is the shadow connected to anxiety and depression? Let's start with anxiety. Anxiety is not always caused by external circumstances. Often, it stems from unresolved inner conflict, a war between who we truly are and who we think we should be. It's the fear of facing aspects of ourselves that we've buried or rejected. We might feel anxiety without understanding why, because on the surface, everything seems fine. But beneath that surface lies the shadow, knocking on the doors of consciousness, begging to be acknowledged. Take someone who is always trying to be kind, agreeable, and accommodating. They might pride themselves on being helpful, easygoing, and non-confrontational. Yet without realizing it, they could be suppressing feelings of anger, resentment, or frustration. Their shadow holds all the times they wanted to say no, but didn't, all the moments they felt taken advantage of, all the needs they sacrificed for others. And their anxiety is the voice of that repressed part, crying out for boundaries, for self-respect. Or imagine someone paralyzed by the fear of failure. They avoid risks, stick to the familiar, and play it safe. But deep down, there is a desire for adventure, for growth, for new experiences. The shadow in this case holds the longing for boldness, for courage, for expression. The anxiety they feel is the tension between their true calling and the version of themselves they feel obligated to uphold. When we deny the shadow, we split ourselves in two. One part of us follows the socially approved script, obedient, polished, acceptable. The other part, the shadow, fights for expression, aching to be seen. This internal tug-of-war creates psychological tension, which often takes the form of persistent anxiety and chronic stress. And then there's depression. Jung viewed depression not simply as a mental illness, but as a signal of profound disconnection from the self. He believed that depression can be a cry from the soul, a sign that something vital within us has been silenced or forgotten. While we often think of the shadow as dark or negative, Jung emphasized that it also contains our hidden gifts, passions, and truths, all the parts of us that have been censored to fit into society's mold. Consider someone who grew up in an environment where creativity was dismissed or undervalued. Perhaps they were told to focus on serious things or criticized for dreaming too much. Over time, they buried their artistic desires, convinced they were silly or unimportant. And yet this repressed creativity doesn't vanish. It lingers in the shadow, and its silence begins to weigh heavily. Eventually, this person might feel a sense of emptiness or hopelessness, not because life has no meaning, but because they've lost touch with a part of themselves that was the meaning. Or take someone who has learned to avoid conflict at all costs, who was taught that anger is bad, that being assertive is rude, that their needs don't matter. They grow up always keeping the peace, always making others comfortable, even at their own expense. But all the suppressed frustration, the unspoken words, the moments when they should have stood up for themselves, all of that lives in the shadow. And if it's never acknowledged, it may eventually surface as a deep and unexplained depression, because something within them is tired of being silent. In many cases, depression isn't just a lack of happiness, it's a lack of wholeness. It's the soul mourning the loss of its own essence. When we exile too many parts of ourselves to the shadow, life can begin to feel meaningless. We move through our days like ghosts, disconnected from our passions, our desires, and our truth. When repression becomes extreme, the unconscious can use depression as a last resort, a way of stopping us in our tracks, forcing us to look within. Jung saw this as a call toward individuation, the journey of integrating all parts of ourselves, including the ones we've tried to hide. Ignoring the shadow is dangerous not because the shadow is evil, but because it is us. It is the parts we've tried to abandon, not because they were wrong, but because we didn't know how to love them. The more we try to suppress the shadow, the more it controls us from behind the scenes. But when we turn toward it with courage and curiosity, we begin the most important journey of all, the journey toward authenticity, toward self-acceptance, and toward inner peace. Carl Jung warned that when we deny our shadow, we become its slave. Everything we suppress doesn't simply vanish, it seeps into our lives in hidden, unconscious ways. The shadow is that part of ourselves we don't want to see, the one we push into the dark corners of our mind. But even if we choose to ignore it, it doesn't disappear. Instead, it finds other ways to make itself known. It appears in our projections, in our exaggerated emotional reactions, in unexpected outbursts, and in subtle, yet persistent, psychological symptoms. For example, a person who refuses to acknowledge their own selfishness may constantly accuse others of being self-centered. Their shadow is projecting outward what they cannot accept within themselves. Or someone who suppresses their sadness and always pretends everything is fine may eventually explode emotionally in a moment they didn't expect. That internal pain, left unseen and unheard, doesn't stay buried, it fights to be felt. And when it finally breaks through, it often does so in ways that feel chaotic or even destructive. So how can we face this hidden part of ourselves? How can we bring healing to the anxiety and depression that often result from a neglected shadow? Jung believed that the only way to release the weight of the shadow is not to fight it, not to reject it, but to recognize it, accept it, and integrate it into our consciousness. Integration doesn't mean giving in to every dark impulse. It means becoming aware of them, understanding where they come from, and learning how to respond to them in a conscious and mature way. This begins with non-judgmental self-observation. Instead of trying to justify or repress our emotions and thoughts, we simply notice them. What am I feeling right now? What triggered this reaction in me? What patterns do I see repeating in my life? Jung also placed deep value on working with dreams. According to him, our dreams are mirrors of our unconscious mind. They reflect truths we might not be ready to face in waking life. By analyzing our dreams, we can uncover powerful insights about our inner world and see aspects of our shadow we were unaware of. A recurring nightmare, a strange symbol, or a confusing situation in a dream may hold the key to understanding parts of ourselves we've been avoiding. Another tool Jung encouraged was keeping a shadow journal, a space to write down thoughts, emotions, and impulses that we usually suppress or avoid. When we allow ourselves to explore these hidden aspects without censorship, we start to develop a deeper connection with who we truly are. And just as importantly, Jung urged us to pay attention to the people who irritate or upset us. Often, what triggers us most in others are reflections of the things we haven't accepted in ourselves. So rather than rejecting or judging those feelings, we can ask, what part of me is being mirrored in this situation? The shadow is not our enemy. It is not something to be destroyed or exiled. In fact, it is a vital part of our wholeness, a part we've ignored for too long. Jung invites us to see the shadow not as something to fear, but as a guide that shows us what still needs to be integrated into our lives. Anxiety and depression are not always signs that something is broken or wrong with us. Sometimes they are messengers, powerful inner signals that something within us is demanding to be seen, acknowledged, and embraced. The true danger lies not in facing the shadow, but in continuing to deny its presence, because the longer we ignore it, the more power it gains over us. For Jung, anxiety and depression were often symptoms of a deeper internal process, the process of individuation. Individuation is the journey toward becoming our true self. It is not just about growing up or discovering your personality. It is about becoming whole. It is about integrating every aspect of the psyche, the conscious and the unconscious, the light and the dark, the known and the hidden. But this path is rarely easy. Individuation does not usually occur in moments of peace and clarity. Instead, it tends to emerge through deep inner crisis, through periods of emotional turmoil, confusion, and breakdown. In the depths of anxiety and depression, when the familiar self begins to crumble, the unconscious steps forward and demands to be heard. In these moments, we are forced to confront the shadow, to face the fears, the wounds, and the truths we've been running from. And while it may feel like everything is falling apart, something deeper is actually coming together. Jung understood that this pain is often a sign that transformation is taking place beneath the surface. Since birth, we've been shaped by the world around us. Our families, societies, and cultures all teach us which parts of ourselves are acceptable and which are not. To be loved, to fit in, we learn to hide our authentic traits and adopt roles that please others. Over time, we build what Jung called the persona, a mask that we wear to navigate the external world. But as we grow, this mask can become a prison. If our identity is built on the expectations of others and not on the truth of who we are, the unconscious begins to rebel. A person who's spent their entire life trying to be strong, never showing vulnerability, may suddenly experience overwhelming anxiety and not understand why. Their shadow is calling out, saying, "You need to feel. You need to allow yourself to be human." Or someone who followed every rule, went to school, got the job, started a family, but feels an unexplained emptiness or sorrow, might actually be living a life that's completely out of alignment with their true self. That depression is not a random condition. It's a message from within, a call to change direction, a signal that the soul is tired of living behind the mask. So when anxiety and depression show up without a clear reason, we must look deeper. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" we should ask, "What part of me is trying to be heard?" These emotions, as painful as they are, might be the very thing that awakens us to our truth. Jung invites us to ask ourselves a powerful and sometimes uncomfortable question. Am I truly living according to my authentic self? Or am I merely fulfilling the expectations others have imposed on me? How many parts of myself have I denied, ignored, or buried under layers of social conditioning and fear? Where is this suffering pushing me? What is the deeper message behind my anxiety? Anxiety, in this light, is not just a disorder or a nuisance. It's a sign, a signal of internal misalignment. According to Carl Jung, anxiety arises when the self feels it is losing control, when there is a growing disconnect between who we think we should be and who we really are deep inside. It's a gap between our outer persona and our inner truth. Jung explained that anxiety often emerges when we cling tightly to an identity that no longer represents who we are. The unconscious mind begins to send out signals: uneasiness, fear, a subtle or overwhelming feeling that something is simply off. A person who has spent years building a career that doesn't ignite their passion, but who is afraid to change paths, may suffer from panic attacks or chronic anxiety. Deep inside, their unconscious knows they are trapped in a life that lacks fulfillment. But the ego, our conscious identity, resists change at all costs. Similarly, someone who has repressed their creative side for years may feel a persistent anxiety, not because something is wrong with them, but because something within them is being neglected. They are ignoring their true calling. That creative energy is knocking on the door of their consciousness, asking to be seen, expressed, honored. In this sense, anxiety is not the enemy. It is a compass. It is a symptom that something inside of us is crying out for recognition and transformation. It's a wake-up call that change is needed, not avoided. Now, if anxiety is the alarm bell, depression is the collapse of the old self. Depression represents a breakdown, not because we are broken, but because something within us has reached its limit. Jung described depression as a sign that a part of the self has died, or is in the process of dying. The problem isn't depression itself, it's our resistance to it. When we refuse to let go of outdated roles or identities, we suffer more deeply. Imagine someone who has built their entire identity around professional success. If they suddenly lose their job, it can trigger a profound existential crisis. The depression that follows isn't just about losing income or routine, it's about losing a sense of self. Their unconscious is urging them to redefine who they are beyond their career, to explore dimensions of themselves that were previously neglected or unknown. Or picture someone who has been the primary caregiver in their family their entire life. If they suddenly find themselves alone, they might descend into depression. Not because solitude is inherently bad, but because they've lost the role through which they understood their place in the world. Their unconscious is inviting them to discover who they are beyond their roles in relation to others. Depression in this way forces us to release old structures, but the suffering intensifies when we cling to them, when we're afraid to let go, to step into the unknown. This is where Jung's concept of individuation becomes vital. The process of individuation, according to Jung, is not a peaceful stroll. It is a death and rebirth. The old self must die so that a more authentic self can emerge. This metamorphosis does not happen without turmoil. It is often accompanied by crisis, chaos, and emotional pain. Anxiety and depression appear when we resist the necessary change, when our unconscious knows transformation is needed, but our ego insists on clinging to the familiar. A person who has lived their entire life according to family expectations and then suddenly feels a deep existential void is not failing. They are undergoing a symbolic death of their former self. The suffering they feel is not meaningless. It is part of a sacred process of transformation. Someone who is overwhelmed with sadness after a long relationship ends is not broken. They are in the midst of reconstructing themselves outside the identity they held within that relationship. They are being given the opportunity to redefine who they are without that person, without that dynamic. Jung once said that the hardest task in life is to discover who you truly are. This journey is not linear. It's not comfortable. It demands that we confront our shadows, challenge long-held beliefs, and release everything that no longer serves our highest good. But on the other side of the crisis, there is something priceless, our truest self. So how can we use anxiety and depression as tools for growth? Instead of treating them as enemies, Jung invites us to see them as messages, clear signs that transformation is not only possible, but necessary. Ask yourself the difficult questions. What part of me is dying? What part of me is trying to be born? Don't resist change. Individuation is painful because it asks us to leave behind the old, but it is the only path that leads to evolution. Face your shadow. What you fear the most about yourself might be exactly what you need to integrate. There is meaning in the crisis. It is not just suffering. It is an invitation to discover who you really are beneath all the layers of conditioning and fear. If you're experiencing anxiety or depression, it does not mean you're broken. It means you are in the middle of a deep and profound transformation. Individuation is not an easy path, but it is the only path that leads to authenticity. And sometimes, in order to truly find ourselves, we must first completely lose who we thought we were. Instead of battling anxiety and depression, we must learn to listen to them, understand them, and allow them to guide us toward individuation. The goal is not to instantly eliminate suffering, but to walk through it consciously, to uncover its meaning and purpose. We have taken a deep and transformative journey throughout this video. We began with the haunting question: how many more hits can your mind take before it breaks? That powerful inquiry opened the door to a truth that cannot be ignored. Anxiety and depression are not enemies to be eradicated. They are powerful messages from the unconscious, crying out to be heard. Through Jung's insights, we have come to understand that these emotional states are signals from the parts of ourselves we've repressed. And when we ignore them, we allow the shadow to take over. Anxiety and depression become moments of individuation, critical junctures where the self must confront its masks and embrace its wholeness. We've explored how suffering can be an opportunity to dig up our authenticity, integrate the shadow, and release the identity we were told to wear. Jung taught us that to heal, we must stop fighting the pain. Instead, we must listen to it, understand it, and transform it into a path toward a more genuine version of ourselves. If you felt something inside you calling out for attention, urging you toward change, this is your sign. Now is the time to take action. Reflect on what you've learned today. Begin applying these tools to reconnect with your true self. Leave us a comment with the words "inner peace" to show that you've been present with us in this transformative journey. And if you want to go even deeper into how self-sabotage operates within our shadow and blocks us from living authentically, stay with us. we have much more to explore. Thank you for joining us on this path of understanding and healing. We'll see you in the next video. Letting go of someone who doesn't value you is one of the most profound lessons you can learn in life. It's not just about walking away from someone, it's about confronting an internal process that tests your self-love, your self-esteem, and your ability to connect with yourself on a deeper level. Carl Jung taught us that the relationships we maintain are not mere coincidences. Rather, they are reflections of our inner world. The people we choose, the dynamics we repeat, and the emotions they trigger within us are all part of an unconscious dance between our conscious self and the hidden aspects of our psyche. When we remain in a relationship where we are not valued, it is not just the other person who is hurting us. On some level, we are the ones perpetuating that cycle. Jung would call this a manifestation of the shadow, the part of us that we prefer to ignore, but that remains present in every aspect of our lives. The shadow contains all our fears, wounds, and limiting beliefs that we have suppressed since childhood. And often, the lack of recognition in a relationship is merely a projection of the lack of recognition we give ourselves. Have you ever asked yourself why you remain attached to someone who doesn't reciprocate your feelings in the same way? Why is it so difficult to let go? Why does a part of you still cling to the hope that everything will change? For Jung, these situations are not random, they are revealing. You are not fighting for the love of another person. You are fighting against the story you have told yourself about what you deserve and how love should work. And until you confront that story, you will continue to attract the same experiences over and over again. The key to freeing yourself does not lie in the other person. It lies within you. It is not about making the other person change or waiting for a recognition that will never come. It is about looking inward and discovering which part of your psyche is sustaining that relationship. Perhaps it is your inner child, still longing to be seen, heard, and loved. Perhaps it is a pattern you learned in your home, where love was always conditional or had to be earned. Or maybe it is a deeper belief about the fear of loneliness, the voice inside you that whispers that without this person, something in you will feel empty. But here's the truth. The only way to find true love is to start with yourself. Jung said that individuation, the process of becoming our most complete and authentic selves, is only possible when we integrate our shadows and face what we have been avoiding. And often, letting go of someone who doesn't value you is the first step in doing so. When you decide to let go, you are not losing something valuable. You are reclaiming something that was always yours, your personal power. Clinging to someone who doesn't appreciate you is, at its core, a way of giving away your energy, of allowing your well-being to depend on external factors. But the moment you say, enough, the moment you choose to walk away from what does not nourish you, something shifts inside you. It is as if the universe responds to your decision with new opportunities, new relationships, and a renewed vision of yourself. The process of letting go is not easy. Jung reminds us that the unconscious clings to what is familiar, even when it hurts us. We get used to patterns of suffering because, at the very least, they are predictable. But that is where the challenge lies, breaking free from what is known to open yourself to the unknown. It is a leap into the void, but a void that does not mean absence, but rather possibility. And this is where true transformation begins, because when you release what does not value you, when you let go of what does not resonate with you, you begin to attract what does. Not because the universe magically rewards you for making the right decision, but because your energy shifts. The way you interact with the world changes. You no longer settle for scraps of love because you have discovered that within you lies an inexhaustible well of self-love. Jung said that projection is one of the most common ways the unconscious expresses itself. What we see in others, what hurts us, what obsesses us, is nothing more than a reflection of something we carry within ourselves. So when someone does not value us, instead of focusing on them, we should ask ourselves, in what way have I not valued myself? Where have I ignored my own needs? In what aspects of my life have I settled for less than I deserve? These questions may be uncomfortable, but they are necessary. Because real change does not happen when someone else decides to treat us better. It happens when we decide to raise our standards. And when that happens, when we truly integrate that lesson, we stop attracting relationships that diminish us, because the external world is always a reflection of the internal world. Life is not about convincing someone to value you. It is about surrounding yourself with people who already do. But for that to happen, you must first be the one who values yourself. Not from the ego, not from arrogance, but from a deep connection with who you truly are. When you see yourself with love and respect, others notice. And those who don't, they simply lose their place in your life. The act of letting go is not a punishment or a defeat. It is an act of self-love. It is telling yourself, I deserve more. And when you truly believe that, when you feel it in every fiber of your being, the entire universe aligns to show it to you. When you decide to let go of someone who does not value you, a part of you may resist. Not because you genuinely want to keep suffering, but because your mind is programmed to avoid change. But the truth is, the greatest growth comes when we embrace the unknown. So ask yourself, are you ready to reclaim your worth? Are you ready to break free from cycles that no longer serve you? Because the moment you do, you step into the life you were always meant to live. Letting go is not the end. It is the beginning of everything. Carl Jung once said that the human psyche seeks balance and stability, even when that stability involves suffering. This is why so many people remain trapped in toxic relationships for years, because the uncertainty of being alone seems far more terrifying than the pain of staying where they are not valued. But here lies the paradox. What you fear losing the most is often what you most need to let go of. The fear does not stem from the loss itself, but from the deep-seated belief that without that relationship, without that person, something within you will remain incomplete. However, this belief is an illusion. You do not need someone else to complete you, because you are already whole. What you truly need is to remember who you are when you are not trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for you. The moment you decide to let go, something powerful happens. You are not just making space for something new to enter your life. You are also sending a clear message to your subconscious. You are ready to evolve. Jung believed that the unconscious mind is always trying to communicate with us, but we rarely listen. It sends us signals through dreams, intuition, and sensations. It reveals, time and time again, which relationships drain us, which situations limit us, and which paths do not align with our true essence. Yet, so often, we choose to ignore these signs because facing the truth is uncomfortable. But the truth remains. Love should not be a constant battle. It should not feel like a battlefield where you must endlessly prove your worth or justify why you deserve to be loved. Jung teaches us that true love, conscious love, can only exist between two individuals who have done the inner work to truly know themselves. Otherwise, what we call love is merely a web of projections, dependencies, and wounds disguised as affection. When you remain in a place where you are not valued, you become trapped in an unconscious cycle. A cycle in which your self-esteem is constantly at stake, where you seek validation from someone who will never be able to provide it in the way you need. Not because they are bad or cruel, but because the recognition you seek does not exist outside of you. It is within. It is the part of you that needs to look in the mirror and affirm, "I am enough, exactly as I am." Letting go of someone does not mean you must hate them, wish them harm, or erase everything you shared. It means accepting that the cycle has come to an end, that the relationship served its purpose in your life, and now it is time to move forward. Often, the resistance to letting go stems from the mistaken belief that the time invested in a relationship determines its value. I have been with this person for so many years. I cannot simply walk away. But time is not a measure of quality. You can spend decades in a relationship that stifles your growth, and you can meet someone in just a few months who transforms your entire life. The true value of a relationship is not in its duration, but in what it contributes to your evolution. Jung spoke of the process of individuation as the journey toward wholeness. This process requires us to integrate our shadows, confront our fears, and release everything that does not align with our true essence. And on this journey, letting go is inevitable, because you cannot become who you are meant to be if you are still clinging to who you once were. The ego will try to convince you that letting go means losing, that if you walk away, you are failing. But your soul knows the truth. Letting go is making space for something greater. When you release those who do not value you, you give yourself the chance to attract people who will. More importantly, you give yourself the opportunity to value yourself, without depending on external validation. Many people hold on because they believe that if they just try harder, if they just love more, if they are just more patient, the other person will change. But Jung reminds us that we cannot change anyone who does not want to change. Growth is an individual journey, and every person has their own timeline. If someone does not value you today, you cannot expect them to do so tomorrow just because you wish it. The only thing you can control is how much longer you are willing to wait for something that may never happen. This is where many people face their greatest internal struggle. They know they need to let go, but something inside them still waits for a sign, a gesture, a promise that things will improve. But time does not change people. Only the decision to change does. And if, after all this time, the dynamic remains the same, it is because a pattern has been established, one that is unlikely to be broken. The most powerful thing you can do for yourself is to make the decision to walk away without expecting anything in return, not to provoke a reaction from the other person, not to make them realize what they have lost, but because you understand that you deserve better. Because when you choose yourself, you emit a different frequency into the world, and that frequency attracts people and situations that resonate with your newfound energy. But here is where most people stumble. Letting go is not an instant act. It is not a switch you flip to suddenly stop feeling. It is a process, a mourning period, an internal reconstruction, where every day you must consciously choose yourself over and over again. There will be days when nostalgia creeps in, when your mind plays tricks on you, only recalling the good moments. There will be nights when you wonder if you made the right decision. And it is in these moments that you must remind yourself why you began this journey in the first place. Self-love is not built in a single day. It is a daily practice. It is the choice to not settle. It is the courage to look at yourself in the mirror and recognize that you are worthy of love. Not because you prove it, not because you beg for it, but simply because you exist. Jung taught us that self-awareness is the key to true freedom. And freedom is not just about doing whatever you want. It is about having the power to choose who and what belongs in your life. Every person who enters your life is a mirror, reflecting something back to you. If someone does not value you, instead of seeing it as an injustice, view it as a lesson. What is this experience trying to teach you? What part of yourself needs to grow stronger? Where have you been compromising your essence just to fit into a narrative that no longer serves you? Letting go does not mean forgetting or denying what you felt. It means accepting reality with courage. It means closing a door with gratitude, without resentment, but with the determination to never reopen it out of fear or weakness. Because true love, the kind Jung described as a connection between authentic souls, can only exist between two people who are already whole within themselves. And if someone cannot see you for who you truly are, then they are not meant to walk this path with you at this moment. You have a choice. You can keep waiting, postponing the inevitable, prolonging the pain, or you can decide that today is the day you begin to let go. Not to prove anything to anyone, but for yourself, because your well-being, your peace, and your self-love are worth more than any relationship that makes you question your worth. Remember this: every time you release something that does not value you, the universe rewards you with something better. Not because the universe works like magic, but because when you shift your energy, you change the way you interact with the world. And when you vibrate from a place of self-love, you attract experiences that reflect that energy. If letting go feels painful right now, if it seems impossible, I want you to remember this. Pain is temporary, but the transformation that follows is eternal. And one day, when you look back and see how much you have grown, you will realize that letting go was never a loss. It was the best decision you ever made. When you choose to let go, the true challenge is not in the action itself, but in the internal resistance that follows. It is that voice in your mind that tries to convince you that maybe you could have done more, that perhaps you did not give everything you had to give, that if you had acted differently, the other person might have valued you. But that is merely a trick of the unconscious, a way to keep you bound to a cycle that no longer serves you. Carl Jung teaches us that clinging to what does not value us is nothing more than a manifestation of our shadow, the part of us that fears facing loneliness, emptiness, and uncertainty. The ego craves answers, wants to close cycles with explanations that make sense of what happened. But the reality is that you will not always receive an apology, nor will you always get closure. More often than not, true closure does not come from the other person. It comes from within you. You do not need someone else to validate your pain, to know that it was real. You do not need someone else to recognize your worth, to know that you are valuable. Everything you seek outside is already within you, waiting to be discovered. The process of letting go is not linear. There will be days when you feel at peace, confident in your decision. But there will also be moments when the past tries to pull you back in. In those moments, your greatest challenge will be to remember why you chose to let go in the first place. Jung tells us that the unconscious operates through patterns and symbols. If you still feel the urge to return to what does not value you, it is because there is a lesson you have not yet integrated. What was it that truly kept you attached to that relationship? Was it genuine love or a need for validation? Was it a real connection or just the fear of being alone? Society has taught us to see solitude as something negative, as if being alone meant being incomplete. But Jung shows us that solitude is a gift, an opportunity to listen to yourself, to embrace yourself, to heal. Because when you step away from the noise, when external distractions no longer keep you tied to dynamics that do not nourish you, that is when you can truly look within and find the answers you have been seeking. Do not fear solitude. Embrace it, because in it, you will find the clarity you have been searching for. Sometimes the problem is not letting go of a person, but letting go of the idea of what we believed that person represented in our lives. We hold on to the image of what could have been, to the good moments, to the unfulfilled promises. But clinging to a story that never was only prevents you from writing a new one. And every time you choose to look back with nostalgia, every time you drown yourself in the what-ifs, you are handing your power over to something that no longer exists. Jung reminds us that transformation happens when we stop resisting change, when we accept that what ended had to end, that what left had to leave, and that our only responsibility is to learn from the experience so that we do not repeat it. Because the real danger of not letting go is not just the pain we prolong, it is the risk of continuing to attract the same type of relationships, the same lessons disguised with different faces. If you do not learn the lesson now, life will present it to you again and again until you are ready to evolve. When you value yourself, you are not afraid to let go, not because it does not hurt, but because you understand that what truly holds value in your life will never make you feel unworthy. True love does not require you to shrink yourself, to adapt, or to become something you are not in order to be accepted. Real love is free, reciprocal, and expansive, and if it is not, then it is not love. It is a reflection of your wounds. This is where self-exploration comes into play. Jung teaches us that self-knowledge is the key to breaking unconscious patterns. Why has it been so hard for you to let go? What part of you still believes it needs to prove its worth? Where did you learn that love must be earned through sacrifice rather than received naturally? These questions might feel uncomfortable, but they are necessary. The more you understand yourself, the easier it becomes to recognize when a relationship is not aligned with your well-being. The key lies in self-observation. Jung spoke of the process of individuation as a journey toward authenticity, and one of the most significant trials in that journey is letting go of those who do not truly value you. Because it's not just about physically distancing yourself from someone, it's about transforming your mindset. It's about reprogramming your unconscious mind so that it stops attracting what does not nourish you. It's about making a conscious choice to surround yourself with people who uplift you instead of exhausting yourself in relationships that exist only out of habit or fear of change. It is normal to feel fear when taking this step. Fear is a defense mechanism of the unconscious, a way to keep you in the familiar, even when the familiar is hurting you. But here's the secret. On the other side of fear lies freedom. On the other side of resistance lies peace. And when you dare to cross that threshold, when you finally choose to release the chains that have kept you bound, you realize that what seemed like a loss was in reality a liberation. Jung spoke of synchronicity as a sign that we are aligned with our purpose. When you release what does not value you, when you let go of what is not meant for you, you begin to notice that things in your life start to flow differently. New opportunities arise. People who truly resonate with your energy begin to enter your life, and what once seemed impossible to overcome becomes just another lesson in your journey of growth. Every time you choose to let go, you create space for something better. But that space will only be filled when you are truly ready, when you have genuinely learned the lesson, when you no longer need to repeat the same story with different characters. Because growth does not happen in comfort. It happens in the discomfort of releasing the old to make way for the new. Look at yourself right now, in this very moment. You are not the same person you were some time ago. You have grown, you have learned, you have evolved, and everything you have experienced, even the most painful moments, has been part of your transformation. Do not regret what you have been through. Every relationship, every challenge, every fall has led you to this exact moment. And this moment is where a new story begins, a story in which you choose yourself. Letting go means trusting that the universe will not take something away from you without replacing it with something better. It means understanding with absolute certainty that what is truly meant for you will never need to be forced, begged for, or explained. It is realizing that your worth is not determined by how someone else treats you, but by how you decide to treat yourself. So, if there is something or someone in your life that has made you feel small, that has made you doubt your own worth, that has made you question whether you are enough, today is the day you make a different choice. Today, you choose to let go, not out of resentment, not out of bitterness, but out of the deepest love you can give yourself. What lies ahead is far greater than what you leave behind, and the only way to discover it is by taking the first step. Because when you finally release what does not value you, you realize that you were never truly losing someone else. You were rediscovering yourself. Now, you are someone who has understood their own power. You have discovered that the true source of love and validation does not come from outside. It comes from within. And that is one of the greatest revelations you can ever experience in life. Carl Jung taught us that everything we experience in the external world is a reflection of our inner world. If you've spent years attracting relationships where you weren't valued, where love felt like a struggle, where you gave more than you received, it's not because something is broken or wrong with you. It's because a part of you had yet to fully recognize your own worth. But now, that part of you is awakening. Now, you understand that you don't have to prove yourself to anyone. Love is not meant to be a battlefield or a sacrifice. Real love is a conscious choice between two people who see and respect each other. The most beautiful part of this process is that when you let go of those who don't value you, you don't just regain your power, you become a magnet for the relationships that truly align with you. You stop wasting time on empty connections. You stop pouring energy into people who aren't ready to appreciate you. Instead, you begin attracting those who truly resonate with who you are. But this only happens when you take the step of choosing yourself, when you close that door with certainty and open yourself to the infinite possibilities waiting for you. From this day forward, every time you feel the temptation to look back, remember why you started this journey. Remember all the pain you endured, all the love you gave without receiving the same in return, all the times you hoped things would change, but they never did. And most importantly, remember who you are now. Someone who no longer begs for love. Someone who has freed themselves from the weight of a story that no longer belongs to them. Someone who is ready to write a new chapter. One where self-love is the foundation of everything. Jung said that life constantly sends us signs, but it's up to us to interpret them and take action. And this is your sign. If you're hearing this message right now, it's not a coincidence. It's the universe, your subconscious, your inner self, showing you the path you need to take. Don't ignore this opportunity. Don't keep postponing your well-being. Don't let fear keep you stuck in a place where you no longer belong. It's time to move forward. It's time to let go. And now, I want to invite you to do something truly powerful. If this message resonated with you, if it touched something deep inside you, I ask you to share it. There are so many people out there still trapped in relationships that make them feel small, who haven't yet found the strength to let go, who still believe love is something they must earn through suffering. Help me spread this message, because right now, at this very moment, someone out there might need to hear these words to take their first step toward freedom. Leave me a comment below. Tell me which part of this message connected with you. What are you willing to do to prioritize yourself? And if you've already gone through this journey, share your story. It might inspire someone else. You could be the guiding light that leads another person toward their own healing. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the upcoming messages. This space is a place for growth, transformation, and awakening. Together, we are building a community where Carl Jung's knowledge and the wisdom of the subconscious become tools for living a fuller, more authentic life. If this message touched your soul, if you feel this is the beginning of a new chapter for you, share it. Because when something changes us, we have a responsibility to share it with the world. Together, we can help more people awaken, let go, and discover the immense power that has always been within them. Remember, letting go is not losing. Letting go is making space for what you truly deserve. It's choosing yourself again and again until the love you seek outside becomes the love that already exists within you. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for being part of this community. I'll see you in the next video. And remember, change begins with you.